screens, it's a plot to drop the IQ. Fighting amongst each other over rulers that don't like you. Prefer us trapped in melancholy with the wood wands of holly. Suggestions that obliterate to camouflage the folly. Attempt a mental robbery, executed sloppily. The hypocrisy, this mockery, and walk the talk with me. Put the hands up to touch the akasha, cause you know deep down there's something bigger than your wallet.
Sweet eternal balance of all that is good, true, and beautiful, friends. Welcome back to Rogue Soul, where tonight we are blessed with the presence of a high-level mind and soul who brings us the gift of looking at the stars, the planets, and their influence upon us from what is a new perspective for most, though an ancient and more occulted one as well. He has revolutionized astrology in the modern age and brought technology to bear in order to help us know more nuanced and specific individualized connections to the heavens, and he's done this through true sidereal astrology. He is the creator of Mastering the Zodiac, a brilliant mind and a deep heart. Athen Chimenti is here with us tonight on Rogue Soul. And we'll get to Athen in a moment. I like to maximize my time with Athen because we're on opposite sides of the world, and when our schedules can, collide, it's we've got just like little windows here and there. And so very lucky to have him on the show. Very excited to get his perspective for you all for 2026, what's coming at us astrologically. And when we went through 2025, and sort of looking back on what had been sort of expected and predicted, and then what happened, you'll find that they align perfectly, of course. And I do want to just say, for those people out there who might be very familiar with traditional astrology, it might not be familiar with true sidereal, that this is a very different type of astrology. And many of you have, been a fan of Athen for many years. He comes on every year and gives us this heads up and this lookout for the year. And so you may have heard this a million times, but many of you might not be as familiar. And so I'll just let you know, what you're most likely familiar with is called tropical astrology. It is what, if you open up the paper and you've got the astrology, like those are all tropical astrology. If you're looking at most places in, online and astrologers, and they're mostly, I'm going to say 98% going to be tropical astrology, so they'll say, oh, it's a new moon in Gemini. And then if you look at Athen and his astrology, it might be a new moon in a totally different sign. And so the main difference is the tropical astrology is going off of, where the stars kind of were, thousands of years ago, and or where the stars and the planets seem to align based on a view of the sky that is very standardized. So when you look up at the sky and you see all of the constellations for all of the signs, Aquarius, Capricorn, Gemini, and these things, the tropical astrology cuts the sky up into very even, I want to say it's like 30-degree, slices. So even if a constellation kind of goes outside of the bounds of that, if you were to overlay them, it doesn't actually fit perfectly in this 30-degree slice that's been given. It might be actually very, very small within that, and then the two signs next to it are kind of coming over its boundaries, or one of them might go into more than one, and so it's kind of messy. It's not real. It's not what you actually see if you're looking at the sky. It is a convenient method. That 30-degree chunk is very clean, it's much easier to calculate things. True sidereal doesn't care where the stars were 2,000 years ago, and it doesn't cut those even slices up of 30 degrees. It just looks at what's actually going on. So each constellation has been given a slice of the sky that is actually where it's at. Right, so a very thin and small and long sort of constellation like Ophiuchus, which is considered in true sidereal and is not considered in any other astrology, but Ophiuchus does cross that ecliptic line. It is one of the constellations. It's the 13th constellation, but it's also very small and narrow. So it has a tiny, in fact, the tiniest slice of the sky. Whereas another sign, and I'm sorry that I don't know one, but I'm going to just make it up. Let's say Cancer might be a much larger and longer and wider sign that takes up a wider the part of the ecliptic and when you're looking at the sky. And so it'll have maybe even much larger than 30 degrees allotted to it. So true sidereal looks at the actual sky. It looks at it right now. It looks at it the actual moment that you were born and what was actually happening very specifically and in detail, not standardized, not sort of shifted off thousands of years and not referencing things that are long gone. So for me, that's very cool. It is realistic. It's what's actually happening, right? It's what, again, whatever you can perceive with your own eyes and your own telescope. If you're looking up at the sky, that's what it is reflecting at you. And I appreciate that. I still love tropical astrology. And I, got my birth chart when I was young. I had it read. It fit me perfectly. It predicted most of my life until about just before I turned 40 years old. And I didn't know that at the time, but that is what seemed to happen. And then I discovered True Sidereal and Athen and his work. And I got my True Sidereal chart, and it was totally different. Not totally, but it's different because of the differences I just described. And so I'm a different sun sign. I'm a different all this. And when I looked into the interpretations, of that chart, it seemed to describe where I had arrived at midlife and perhaps the next portion of my life. And so that was really interesting to me too. So true sidereal is also different from sidereal astrology, and it's different from Vedic astrology. So a lot of people who have studied astrology will hear me talk about true sidereal, and they'll think that I mean sidereal astrology, and I don't, and Athen doesn't. So if you kind of went that direction with it, that's not it either. And I just invite you to go, in fact, on roguesoul.org, my site, you can go to the favorite things tab and you can click on the Mastering the Zodiac link, and it'll take you to Athen's site. And he has a free birth chart for you. He's got free weekly newsletters for you. He's got all this content for free. But if you do want to get a reading from him and interpret your birth chart or he's going to be offering yearly 2026 readings coming up here in a little bit as well. And if you want to get any of those things, I get a little affiliate boost, but you get this treasure trove of new information, insight about yourself. So I hope you all do that. Go to roguesoul.org, click on the favorite things tab, check out Mastering the Zodiac, sign up for his newsletter and more. And without further ado, I will bring on Athen and we will talk to him. All right, Athen, it's so good to see you again. Welcome back to Rogue Soul. How have you been?
Well, not too bad. It was a challenging year to say the least, but I'm feeling pretty good about the new year, and yeah, things are flowing quite nicely. But great to be on, Lindsay. Thanks again for having me.
I love having you. I love that we get to do these check-ins. I love that we get to get the sort of astrological lay of the land. And I know we do this every year. So last year, when we talked, how do you feel like the year that actually occurred matched up to sort of maybe what you expected to see based on the astrology? Was 2025 what you thought it would be?
Right. Well, hindsight's always 2020, right? And so I could go back and say all the ways I was right or I saw it. And I'll definitely say that it was not specifically in the way that it unfolded, but generally it was more so than how I saw it. It's almost like once you see it unfold, it's like, oh, of course, that makes total sense. But yeah, last time we talked about, I think the most important thing was Pluto going into Capricorn. And so that was a major change. And again, we talked about as being something very subtle that's going to be taking years to unfold, but it's amazing, I think, how much we've already seen transform. So we talked about, Pluto's the planet of transformation, death, and rebirth, and Capricorn represents all of the structures of society when we look at it collectively like this. So our governments, our institutions, companies, industries. Basically, when it comes to Pluto, it was everything we built over the past 250 years. So we were saying that the last time Pluto had entered Capricorn was literally in 1776, which was the birth of the United States, but also just the birth of new forms of government that started to take place over the coming decades, really transitioning from monarchy into the more republican and democratic forms of government that we have today. And this is what we're seeing. It's really the beginning of this, not just politically, but also within industries. I mean, entire industries are getting transformed. companies, the whole way we've structured things. So yeah, so that's been very interesting. We've seen that politically, I think. I think a lot of what we're seeing now is actually the beginning of, at least for the United States, I would say at least the next 15 years in terms of political developments. A lot of the same kind of energy we've seen unfold recently, we can expect over the next 15 years when we look at the US chart specifically. We're already seeing things in terms of other countries, UK, Europe, a lot of things still early. And we saw that too back in the late 1700s in the sense that certain countries do lead the way with a lot of the transformations and stuff. But we already see a lot of things boiling under the surface in the Western world in general. We see entire industries, the medical establishment, Hollywood, you name it, going through transformations. Basically, the old systems, the old companies, the old power structures are holding on very tight to their existing systems. But we're, in my opinion, just going to continue to see less and less of a control and less of a grip over what they've had control over for so long. So yeah, so that's been, interesting. And, that's, I think, been the most important thing. We talked about it very generally coming into it, but now that it's happened, it's like we could point to all the little specific details that this has happened with. But me, I'm very optimistic now. We were talking just before we started recording about numerology and how we've ended that 9-year. So last year was a 9-year. I normally don't follow a numerology that closely. I'm usually exclusively astrology, but this particular year, I think it's just a good way of summing things up. So anyways, I feel like the transformations have already started. Yes, there's still things to transform over the coming years, but me personally, coming out of last year, which is again very challenging for many of us, I'm feeling very optimistic now coming into the new year. I can feel the new energy already. Astrologically, Pluto's well set in Capricorn now. So the toughest part of any new transit is always the very beginning. It's almost like you have to first acclimate and get used to the energy, before it gets easier. And it's only going to get easier from here. So yeah, being open to change, being open to in our personal life, getting rid of the old and outworn and making way for the new, especially with the things that we've relied on or built in our life, is really the name of the game. And especially right now, as you mentioned, we have this new moon currently coming up, right? Or it's actually happening now, right in between Sagittarius and Capricorn. But the fast movers are now going over each other and going over Pluto as they all make their way into Capricorn. So I think this month will be specifically a nice step in the right direction in regards to some of these bigger picture things.
Oh, wow. Yeah, what a moment. It is interesting that 9 energy of last year and all of the challenges of 2025 and coming into that Pluto Capricorn energy and just how rough it was. I mean, we saw like the WHO was falling apart. Hollywood, like you said, is rapidly changing. We're seeing like the UN is being challenged, the NATO is being challenged, like all these old structures are kind of moving. The whole geopolitical situation is in flux, all of this stuff. And now we're in this 1 year. And then, like you said, that's sort of a new beginning. And then, today specifically, as you said, with this new moon and all of this stellium, and this is sort of like a big, brand new push and energy. And so I guess I didn't realize that was also connected to Capricorn, like Pluto is. So yeah, tell us about how this might feel new or what we might look for, especially today specifically, and what people can hope for.
Yeah, totally. You're right, because we've had so many fast moving planets conjoining at the same time, which is, like you said, in and of itself a very rare, I wouldn't say very rare, but it's quite rare kind of thing. I mean, Mercury and Venus are doing it sort of often, but then now Mars was part of it. But what makes it so unique is, yeah, it's happening right over Pluto. So a lot of the planets already went over the sun, but they're going over the sun as they go into Capricorn. And now they're all going to go over that Pluto we were talking about one by one. So,
Wow.
astrologically, what that symbolizes is that a lot of the bigger picture stuff we're talking about, multi-decade stuff, multi-century stuff we were just talking about, gets activated on a monthly basis. So the cycle has literally just started, this lunar cycle. I think between now and March is when a lot of this is getting particularly activated, mainly because of, again, the fast movers still needing to go into Capricorn, but also we have other, important events. Saturn and Neptune are getting together late February, early March, and then the lunar cycle activates it there. But anyways, yeah, things are already, I would say, the way you said that is very interesting, because I would say like this would be the most new beginning. Like if we were to use astrology to determine when the new year would be, typically we would do it after the winter solstice, because the winter solstice is I would say fundamentally the beginning of the year. But you would do it like for the first new moon after that, usually, because you want to be in tune with the lunar cycle. So this is not the first new moon after the solstice. We had that, but it's the new moon that is now happening with all the planets conjunct and going over this very important Pluto into Capricorn. So I would say that the year has started Gregorianly, the Gregorian calendar, and with the traditional astrology, but I think the real beginnings of the year are happening this lunar cycle, basically this week, slowly going into the coming weeks here. So yeah, Capricorn system structures are their own personal systems and structures. The way I would classify this in a way that I think we can all relate to it the easiest, I think, is to look at what Pluto just did this past cycle. So Pluto just transitioned from Sagittarius into Capricorn. And I think we talked about, at least a couple episodes ago, about how when Pluto was in Sagittarius, and this was since 2007, mind you. So Pluto in Sagittarius until 2007, up until last year, was transforming our beliefs. So Sagittarius is about our beliefs. It's about our perspective on life. It rules things like our spiritual viewpoints, philosophies on life, our view of life, belief systems, perceptions, perspectives. And so that's gone through major, I think, transformations. And we're talking about how so many of us, myself included, you as well, 2007, and after that period was just so much change to our view of life and perceptions and even spirituality and stuff, right? So that's what's concluded, in the sense of where the major changes are happening. So all of this stuff around perception, belief, and where we saw a lot of power struggles as well, especially in the Western world, but really globally as well, East versus West, a lot of trying, and with AI, trying to, control or dominate perception and belief and what's true and not true. This is all Sagittarius. So that to me has wrapped up, and now it's going into the next sign, Capricorn, which Capricorn is after you've had, in this case, a transformation to your beliefs. You have a new worldview. You have just maybe more open. With Pluto, you have a more non-attached worldview typically. So you've had some kind of ego death around it. You're less attached to it. You're more open to different perspectives and things. So that's happened collectively. But once that happens, then it's about, okay, what can you actually do with this? What can you do with this new mindset? What can you do with this new perspective? And in that sense, Capricorn very much rules what we do publicly and productively. So traditionally, like your career, your legacy, your work, but just really anything that you consider like what you want to leave behind in this life. I think fundamentally, maybe legacy is the closest word to that, but really what you're here to accomplish and achieve, not necessarily for profit or for money, but this could be for some, your home life, your family life, relationship, whatever. So this more like, what do you want to see long-lasting change with, and how do you want to positively impact the future and the world at large? So that's where I think we're probably all going to really start to have, we've already been having transformations last year, but last year being the still ending of that previous Sagittarius cycle, the ending of the numerology cycle. Now I think this is where we're starting to see the real new beginnings emerging with this. So great time for, asking yourself, what do you feel like you want to do that is going to require a ton of time, a ton of patience, a ton of perseverance, but is true and real to you. It could be, your career or something, but anything that is just long term that you feel like is going to, really pull on your achieving side and your accomplished side, and starting to plant those seeds. And I think there's going to be very beautiful things emerging both personally and collectively with this, mostly with Saturn and Neptune. So they're going to conjoin. Last time this happened was in 1989. And so we can look at the parallels now, because the beauty with astrology is you can always look at the previous cycles and see because this idea that history doesn't repeat but it rhymes, we can use that with astrology. So 89, I mean, for the Western world and the Eastern world, I would say perhaps the most significant thing was the fall of, at the time, the communism or the Soviet Union, and more of a merging between the East and the West. And a lot of, again, old political systems that just got transformed at that time. Perhaps we could say for different reasons than the Pluto stuff, but nonetheless. So this is a little bit hindsight because we're already seeing it early, right? We're already seeing a lot of, structures that maybe were leaning more towards the dictatorial sides, or the, what we were calling communism back in the 80s. I mean, really, we could distill it down to a more despotic type of rulership. So more of a dictatorship kind of a situation where, yeah, sure, maybe it's got the image of doing something for the greater good of humanity. Communism, usually all this stuff, it's not real socialism, it's, real communism. It's just, dictatorship. But that's what we saw really falling at the time there, during the late 80s and early 90s, with the fall of the Berlin Wall, and like massive transformations in Europe. And not just in Europe, but a lot of countries that were more Soviet tied or communist tied started to crumble as well. And we're seeing this now, right? So we're seeing this, perhaps you could say this about Venezuela at the moment. Perhaps you could start to see this perhaps with countries like Cuba, which are having a very difficult time with their current political system. You can even see it in very Western countries like the UK and Britain that are what we talked about, I think, before, is, this idea of transformations to the political systems. I think anywhere where there's already kind of monarchy or some kind of, previous cycle form of system, there's likely to be some major changes there. And even in the States, we've seen major changes. We're seeing the Middle East. So we're seeing it across the board. And I expect that to continue. But it's so interesting for everyone to ask yourself, like, what are the parallels of what you saw in the late 80s and early 90s? Because astrologically, that's what we're experiencing coming into these, basically this year. Saturn and Neptune will conjoin around late February, early March, here in just about a month or so. So not that those months are everything. It's always very subtle, but it's certainly the time period and the surrounding years of these kinds of changes. And then, of course, like I always do, ask yourself what you can do personally that you feel like is something new you can build. With Saturn and Neptune, it's really about what you want to do on a soul level. What do you want to build for the long term, but that maybe isn't so much for ego reasons, and maybe it's more for spiritual reasons, maybe because you really enjoy it, maybe because it gives you peace, maybe it's some higher purpose, maybe you have a dream or ideal about actualizing something or building something in life. Saturn can make that into a reality. So it's about a new cycle with ideals, with dreams. I think we saw this, collectively, a lot of idealistic governments, or at least selling us an idealism, came crumbling down. I think we're seeing the same thing now. And but from that, a brand new foundation being laid in terms of healthier idealism. So again, what is calling you on a soul level? What are you dreaming about? What do you want to see manifest? And starting to build those new foundations moving forward. So we see it both personally and collectively, I think, at the moment.
I love that. I think so many people feel ready for that. I feel like so many people are ready to sort of shake off the old and move into this new. And it's always been sort of growing, right? Like, what do we really truly want, and what do we truly idealize and hope for? And that's been sort of, starting to like burgeon out into the world. And, we're seeing it in Iran too, this revolution. And I know everyone has their ideas about like what's right and what's wrong, and what should happen geopolitically, but in essence, like everything is sort of being challenged and it's going to transform. And that could be, yeah, very challenging as it goes. But it also, I don't know that it always has to be as challenging as people expect. I think everyone has a lot of fear because things seem up in the air and they're shaky, and it's not secure, and so that can cause a lot of fear. But I know you, I think usually too, like, not because we're stupid, but because we actually see the potential of how things could go really well. And Doesn't mean it's always easy, but it just doesn't mean it's as challenging as I think people are programmed with like doomsday movies and just these scenarios in their head that are all horrible. And I'm like, I don't think all of this transformation has to be horrible. Challenging, maybe, but good actually, right? And do you see it that way? Or do you see like we're gonna go through a lot
100
more challenge or
No, 100% with everything you just said. I'm so glad you said that, and that you view it that way, because that's how I view it too. I think first there's a lot to say there. I mean, first of all, with all the doomsday and all that, I mean, that was part of the control with the perception thing. I
yeah.
think that's over. And I think everyone will see how last year was really the year where that started, either ended or started to end. I mean, I think it's ended. I think a lot of the ending of that was probably the year before. So was that 2024 already ending? 2025 ended. So I think we're over. We're over. I think anything that would come from like really bad perception and stuff, because again, if you're caught up into fear and you believe, if you believe, like, our this is what Sagittarius is our belief is like one of, if not the most important, impactful things on what you will experience. If I say, like, that in that analogy, like if I say there's a lot of blue cars here, and like all you're going to see is blue cars, it's that kind of a thing. So, but not just that. I mean, that's just a practical example, manifestation. The power of belief and all the stuff that we already know, that a lot of us in healthy ways learned from 2007 till recently, but a lot of the negative of it too, of giving our power away to belief and letting others control our belief, oftentimes unconsciously or indirectly through things like media and movies and all this stuff that we're all guilty of watching and consuming and having unconscious beliefs around that same stuff. I think that's over. But to your point, I think that's so important to see the power of your belief. And at the same time that we've been talking about this stuff for years, right, Lindsay? All this, like, I'm talking about the destruction of systems. I'm comparing 2025 to 1776. I mean, there's a lot of room to see that and be like, oh man, we're totally doomed. I mean, that's it. Like, we're going to war, whatever horrible things. And these things there are potential. There's a possibility for all this kind of stuff. But I think what's happening is that we're evolving, and even though we're seeing cycles repeating, I think humanity is spiraling. So it's like, that solar system that we're taught in school, where it's just 2D. It's like it's just the sun in the middle and everything's on this flat plane, and it's just and it's like just endlessly orbiting, and it's not going anywhere except flat on the ground, on the paper. Well, what's actually happening is we're spiraling. Yeah. So the sun itself is moving tremendous. We don't even know how fast, because we just use relativity. We could be moving at the speed of light relative to other things and measuring that. Who knows? But we're flying through space, the solar system. And so what that ends up looking like, I think a lot of you have seen it. It looks like, like this. The sun is moving through space and the planets are spiraling. The reason I mention that is because when we have this Saturn Neptune cycle I just said, which is since 1989, or this 250-year Pluto cycle with late 1700s, it's not like we're returning back to that same place. If you were using the 2D model, you would be, right? We would be in a perpetual state of like repeating the same thing over and over and over again if it was 2D. But the fact that we're moving through space means that we never actually come back to the same place twice. Yes, it's similar, but it's like a higher octave is how I like to think of it.
Yeah.
So what we're experiencing now, and we relate it to 89, I think by default is naturally going to be way more challenging, or at least just more challenging than this time around, so long as the overall trend has been up. Now, mind you, there are downtrends, yeah, and life has these larger cycles and these waves, but I'm very convinced that we're on an uptrend in the sense of our growth and evolution. So because of the larger uptrend being that we're growing and evolving, it's just that much easier each time. And I think the next time we have the Saturn Neptune, however more advanced we are then, 30 years from now or 40 years from now, and we look back and we say, okay, like they might look back and say, hey, that was really challenging of what they experienced, but to them, it'll be much easier. So yeah, there'll be challenges, but I think overall, we're evolving and growing, and things are just, we don't need to necessarily have bloody wars where literally hundreds of thousands of people have to die across the world, and we are seeing war, we are seeing tons of death, we are seeing a lot of this stuff, but as you can see, it's less, and it's an evolution, I think, from similar things playing out in previous cycles. So anyways, for a lot of reasons, I'm more optimistic, but more importantly, yeah, like perception is very important. And if, we go around and expect the worst, that's not gonna help anybody. And as we've seen, there's a lot of room for it. There's a lot of room right now to be, to have a more doomy look on things, certainly. But as we've already seen, as I said, the analogy, we talked about 2025 endlessly. Many years we were talking about 2025, and I had to repeat myself. I had to say, look, I know this sounds horrible, but I don't think it's going to be like that bad. Now that we've had that, now we've had this 2025, at least from my perspective, I'm like, okay, good. Because I could have been wrong.
Right.
I could have been maybe a little bit too optimistic, but at least for my sake, I'm like, okay, I was right. Like, yeah. We didn't need to freak out so much.
Hey, I'd rather be too optimistic and find out I was wrong than be really pessimistic and miss out on, the good things. So
that's a very good point. Yeah.
Well, I want to be respectful of your time. I know you might have to go. Do you have time to talk about the rest of the year a little bit more? Okay.
I can go over a little bit.
All right, so we're talking about Saturn and Neptune in late February and these sorts of things that could be coming up there. What else do you see throughout the year kind of coming at us that we might want to pay attention to or look out for? Or is that sort of the biggest deal this year?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the concentration of what's important about the year is happening in these first few months, and it is very much concentrated around the Pluto and then the Saturn and Neptune conjunction. But there are, of course, other things to talk about. The main other one is that the outer planets are actually in pretty good configuration. So that doesn't mean that, again, everything's going to be peaches and cream, because again, from the more important side, like the Pluto entering Capricorn and the Saturn Neptune thing, these are more challenging energies. They lean more towards the challenging side, generally speaking. But it's very nice to see that we actually have some support, which is like harmonious angles, what we call aspects in astrology, between the outer planets. And the outer planets are the ones, again, that represent sort of what we're going through collectively here. So a lot of the benefit here is that we have Uranus trining up to Pluto. So that's going to be starting around the June-July time. This is also going to be around the same time here that Jupiter enters Cancer. So let's go ahead and start with that first. So in June, mid-June, Jupiter will go into Cancer. We've had Jupiter in Gemini, and we talked about this last time, and that's where he is until mid-June, where we can be learning a lot about communication and, on a collective standpoint, trade and negotiations and things. We're talking about how a lot of this would be expanded this year, and of course we are seeing that collectively there. But anyways, learn about communication, be open-minded. It's a great time to be curious. It's a great time to be learning practical skills, learning languages, learning new things, really on a mental and communicative level. Now, Jupiter going into Cancer will start to expand the more domestic, security-based aspects, let's say, collectively. So there'll likely be much more of a focus on, similar to what we see in the States. I don't know if we went over like Trump's chart, for example, but like his South Node is in the 4th house of like security, and that's why he's so much about like, the home of the country and the security and the borders and all that kind of stuff. So we've already seen that in the States, being things leaning more towards the security of, wanting to protect its people and like focusing more on the domestic aspects of the political experience.
Yeah.
I'm expecting a lot more of that collectively once we get to mid-summer. So when Jupiter goes into Cancer and off and on for about a year, Although, is he going to fly? I think he just flies right into Leo. Let me see if he goes retrograde back into Cancer. No, he doesn't. So actually, it's going to be a very fast transit of Jupiter in Cancer. It'll basically just be from that mid-June until about early September. So let's call it the summertime there. There'll likely be a lot of expansion and a lot of developments around that collectively. So we're talking more of a focus on, again, domestic, personal security, home, family, hopefully some, community related things. Because it, as we've talked about before, like I'm really big on like taking care of the local community and getting more community involved. In terms of the individual and doing that individually. Hopefully we see some of that, focusing more on that kind of home, immediate environment, towns, cities, focus, caring, a little more caring energy, a little more nurturing energy for others as well. So anyways, that's there. And then collectively, more on the domestic. On a personal level, just a good time for this stuff. Probably learning a lot about our past, maybe past lives, things like our family, our lineage. This is what Jupiter's really expanding. And then I'll just talk about it now. So then when we do get to September, he goes into Leo, and that's going to be for over the next year, which is more expansion in terms of self-expression and media and things like this. So anyways, there's a lot we could talk about this, but I would just say from mid-September, really good to see what are you passionate about? What do you love? And starting to cultivate a little bit of this. With that being said, focusing on community, I think is the case here, because the North Node is in Aquarius. And so what it's saying is that while there will be a lot in terms of developing what we love and matters of the heart, which is Leo, the key to all that, even right now, is actually on being a part of things greater than ourselves. So it's the North Node in Aquarius. Aquarius is about contribution. It's about being a part of things greater than ourselves, realizing that we're only one piece in something larger. So that could be in your personal life, community, friends, networks, in your business, personal relationships, connecting. It also rules technology as well, but, innovating and forward thinking. Outside of the September thing, I would say that's probably one of the most important things about this year. If we want to grow and we want to focus on, okay, how can we get the most out of this year? I think probably the number one way, even including everything I've just talked about, when we say, what can I do? Like as in the free will, if you can push yourself, incorporate some of that free will in two key areas. One is community building, or what I'm calling community building, which is, finding your role in the world relationship-wise. And then also utilize technology, innovation. These are probably the two most important things to see growth and movement in your life, whether it's your personal life, your productive life, relationship life, whatever it might be there. That's the North Node. That's where it's always really good to put a lot of free will energy there. But anyways, we'll see more of that activated once we get to September onwards. But my point about the summer there is that's where Uranus will start to trine Pluto. So this is an energy that's I'll just say, very supportive for change. Both of these planets are about transformation and changes. And I just think we have a lot of support for that. Fundamentally, like I said, I think we've come out, whatever's been difficult, I think we're coming out of. There will still be challenges. And of course, it depends on the personal charts and everything. But generally speaking, we've already passed the acclimation phase. We're still acclimating, but the main acclimation phase. And we're starting to build momentum, especially by the summertime. We're really building momentum here. And there's just a lot of support for a lot of these changes that we might want to make in our life, especially when it comes to listening to our excitement, doing the things that excite us a little more or a lot more, transforming things to make that happen. And even with Uranus, getting more involved in community and tech and contribution, I think we're going to see a lot of progress. I mean, it goes without saying we're going to see a lot of progress in the technological sphere already with, with what we've seen with Saturn and Aquarius, with the AI and all that starting, it was about 2022. But it's just a good area to really put energy into both personally and collectively this year. The chart's almost like kind of pointing towards that for us to do.
I love it.
But yeah, those would be the main things. Mm-hmm.
Well, I thank you for sharing all that with us. And I, myself and a few other sort of psychic, channels that I know have gotten the message that this year, especially around the summer, maybe late spring through the summer, that it might not be a good time to travel. Or some of the messages are almost like you won't be able to travel, which is
Mm.
interesting too. And with this sort of energy of, like home and community and whatever, I wonder if there's just something where that's sort of maybe part of it. Do you see that could connect with the sort of saying home and like community and family and closer in energy?
It could, because well, Jupiter is the planet of travel.
Huh.
So whatever Jupiter's doing, we can get a sense of like what travel is like, or what we can do there. So the planet of travel is in the area of roots. And
Huh.
so it is actually traditionally a very comfortable place for Jupiter. I will say that. That Jupiter actually likes to be here as a planet. When you look at traditional astrology, it's comfortable here. It likes to be here, which can tend to make those things a little bit easier. But if you're getting that guidance, then what I would say is certainly is more than now. So right now, Jupiter in Gemini, there should be a lot of things actually flowing with, especially short distance travel. I don't know what that means collectively, but like things are just very buoyant, abundant in terms of business, trade, short-term travel, things of this nature. We didn't even get into ships. Ships is a whole other thing because that's Saturn and Pisces, and so there's a whole lot of new beginnings and structuring happening with that,
Oh, wow.
as we've seen. That's a 20 hindsight thing that I didn't see before. Saturn going into
Yeah.
Pisces has really impacted that
But we
space.
could
But
see
anyways,
that all geopolitically too, all around the world with the,
yeah,
so that's interesting. Yeah.
yeah. So that's another 2 years with Saturn and Pisces. That almost happened to the day, like when Saturn entered Pisces last year. Actually it started. When did Saturn exactly enter? I remember looking and I was like, that was like to the day. No, so yeah, it was officially February, officially like March of 2025, and I'm pretty sure that that's when we started to see a lot of that stuff. But anyways,
Wow.
um, Saturn's there for another 2 years. So shipping is a different story completely. But if we just talk about travel in general, yeah, right now, Jupiter and Gemini, no one would say that it's inhibited right now. But if it were to be inhibited this year, then yeah, when Jupiter goes into Cancer is the most likely. And that also happens to coincide with a Mercury retrograde, which, mind you, Mercury retrograde does happen 3 times a year, but he's going to be right next to Jupiter when it happens. And does he go into Cancer? He gets really close to Cancer, doesn't quite enter. Yeah, within 1 degree there. But anyways, right next to Jupiter. And so, you have this whole retrograde period that's specifically in July. So the first 3 weeks of July is when, again, Jupiter will then officially be in Cancer, but then you also add to that a Mercury retrograde. So it's always hard to, predict these things. But if I had to bet, like if it was going to happen, and I had to bet on like it was like the bet was, is it okay if it happens next year? So or this year, if it happens in 2026, when would it most likely be? Astrologically, I would put my money on the late June, early July time, because of what we're seeing there astrologically. So we'll see. But Jupiter in Cancer is definitely not. Cancer is not the travel area, as you said. It's more on the domestic life. So we'll see what kind of, how that plays out. It could be actually as a result of maybe more of that focus on protecting and preserving collectively, which would then, like, if there is an inhibition of travel, maybe they don't want people to travel as much. It's just more difficult. It might be for the sake of, focusing more on the domestic and,
Yeah. I mean, that's
immediate
that sort of
environment
thing,
stuff.
right? Like if there's a challenge with that and you feel like, oh man, though, I wanted to travel or I wanted to do this and now this is happening, or even if it feels scary, like you said, if there's some sort of like travel ban or something, something like that, it still would bring you back to this focus on the, what's around you, what can you access, who's here and how can we connect and sort of shore this up, which is a positive thing to do. But it also might not be scary at all, right? It might just be um who knows what else. But I also keep thinking about the sun and the stages of the sun and the geomagnetic situation and the magnetosphere and all of this. And so I wonder if there will be some sort of, solar storms and maybe not even that it will be this sort of like big grounding or effect, but just that I might, and some people might be like, this isn't a very safe time to fly. Or it might
Hmm.
be a little bit more dangerous to be in a plane when things are more radiation
Hmm.
intense, you know? So
Hmm.
might be as simple as that even. But yeah, thanks for
Yeah.
that insight.
And what I would say about a Cancer, just to wrap that up, is Cancer is water and small bodies of water, not ocean. Well, let's say non-salty bodies of water. So lakes, rivers, and rain. So Jupiter, again, expansion. And Jupiter's Zeus, by the way. So if those that know a little bit about Greek mythology and stuff, so Zeus was very much about the storm and, utilizing weather specifically. But anyways, yeah, Jupiter expanding Cancer. If we look at it from more of how do you say, climate or nature events type of perspective, then we would expect to see more water, more
Yeah.
rain, maybe flooding. So my money would be more on the, like, if we were going to say there's going to be some natural disasters this year, my money would be that around the summer it leans more towards the water-based ones.
Interesting.
We're
Yeah.
talking floods, maybe hurricanes or things like that. Yeah.
Huh. Yeah, it's always fun to wonder, and then it's even more fun to see what actually happened. I love both, right? Like I like getting the look ahead like we just got. I like looking back at what just occurred, which we just did too. It's really fun for me. I did that with the tarot too. And it's like you said, it's 2020. It's easy to look back and say, oh, that's what that had predicted or had said, and that's how it fits. Where at the time that I'm, getting these messages, I'm like, I don't know exactly what that means. I don't know how that's going to play out. There's so many variables that it would be impossible to say, but we get these ideas, we get this sort of orientation, and I think that that's really helpful too. Is there anything else you want to throw into the mix for this year, or what we should be thinking about, or what might be coming?
I think that's good. Yeah, no, I think that's good. Those are the main things. So again, like the good news is there's no major squares. Now squares things get done, but they tend to be more challenging. So it's not so again, a lot of implied challenges, but hopefully, you know, the listeners have picked up on also the implied opportunities, but nothing I need to add that's like, extra challenging or something to the year that we would maybe more normally have with square, because typically you have kind of 50-50 with the aspects, and now we're leaning more towards the easier side with the aspects versus some squares or things like that might be a little more difficult. But again, it's in the larger context of the bigger cycles that we talked about.
Yeah. Yeah, we're definitely going through those bigger cycles. And I like the idea that this is a little bit easier year, but even like we said, in the challenging moments, like those opportunities are arising, it's serving us in the long run. And we're either purifying and letting go of like what doesn't serve us anymore, or we're creating what does, and sometimes that's a bit rough, but it's always actually aiming upwards. And I'm with you. We're on the upwards movement here, right? Everything's going to get better from here on out. And so I like that energy. I also want to remind people I love the true sidereal, natal chart, birth chart. I love that you provide readings for this. I love that it's different from what most people have experienced before. I know that even if they have looked into it and connected with it, you have deeper or different types of readings and ways people that can connect with you for true sidereal astrology. And so if people go to the site at Rogue Soul and they go to my favorite things page, at Mastering the Zodiac is there. And so they can click on that. I get a little boost if they want to, and then they get to get a reading from you, get deeper into their chart, see what is maybe coming for their 2026. And so I hope people go there, use that link, connect with Athen, get a reading, get your chart, get everything you can. And do you want to say anything else to people about what you can offer or what they can find on your page or anything else?
Just that. I think you have the link to the chart calculator, or if you just, yeah, whatever link to the website, you'll see the button there to view your signs. We're using different system than mainstream astrology, so your signs will be different, but it's where the planets actually were when you were born. So I just invite everyone to check that out. There's a free chart calculator there, and also the mini reading that already comes on the page without even having to put your email or anything. You can just read it and see if it resonates. And if it does, yeah, we've got tons of resources, reports. You get your natal report. We're about to release yearly reports, which I'm really excited about. So maybe by about the February time, we'll have yearly readings. So you'll be able to look at not only your natal chart, but also the upcoming year for you personally, much like what we did collectively, but for individuals. But yeah, it's all
Wow.
there at masteringthezodiac.com, courses, readings, all that good stuff.
Courses too. Yeah, I love it. Being able to look at your specific year, ahead with this is, I think, so valuable too. So when I first looked at my true sidereal chart, having already been very familiar with my tropical, sort of normal astrology chart for many years, my mind was blown. It just made so much sense. It resonated so much. And not to say my other chart was wrong, right? It just was different. And I think you and I have talked about this before, that for me, at least, it seemed to resonate with like the first kind of like half maybe, or third, I don't know, portion of my life. And then the true sidereal, when I found it, it was like it was describing now, like who I've become and where I'm headed for the rest of my life. And so I don't know if that's true for everyone, but that's just how it felt for me. And I loved it. It's so insightful and helpful. So is that how you feel
Yeah,
about
that's
it?
great. Yeah, no, I think it crosses your path when it's meant to cross your path. If you see it and it doesn't resonate, then, like you said, there's other charts, there's tropical and all that. But if if it is crossing your path right now, that's why I invite everyone to check their charts, because like you just pointed out, I think things cross our path when they're meant to, and it might be a time to check out your true sidereal chart and see if it resonates with where you are at the moment, I suppose.
Yeah. And so Mastering the Zodiac, also you have the weekly flyer that you send out, the newsletter. That is so cool. I love it. On your Instagram, people can find Mastering the Zodiac. You do also the little videos and the shorts of what's going on, and that's so helpful. So you have all of this stuff that people can access their birth chart, that content for free. That is really, really fun. And then you've also got the reading. So I hope everyone gets their reading, especially when you release the yearly opportunity, and that they get those too. And what else do you want to say to people before we say goodbye? What are your final sort of thoughts?
No, just it's always great to connect, always great to have these conversations. And I wish everyone an awesome year. Again, I think it's going to be very constructive. I think, it's still transition. I think we're still transitioning from the previous years, but I think it's a great year to plant new seeds. And I would say just, follow your soul with that Saturn Neptune thing. It's like in Saturn and Pisces right now, it's like, there's a lot of there's so many things outside of our control and in life. And, our soul is trying to guide us through all of that. It's extremely difficult because, like, especially in the Western world, we want to know exactly what I need to do. I need a clear path. I need to know exact steps. But right now it's a time of like, maybe your soul knows what those steps are. Maybe it's not totally clear in terms of where it's headed, but you'll know it's right if your soul is saying yes to that, right? So anyways, listen to that, honor that. I think it's a great year for this, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised, just even as soon as March. Follow that like now and through March, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised that you'll see how everything is in a higher timing, or even a divine timing, or spiritual timing, universal timing, if you will. And sometimes we can't know that mentally, but we can feel that spiritually or emotionally, and now is a great time to feel it emotionally and spiritually. So anyways, wish everyone the very best, and thank you so much, Lindsay, for having me on again.
Thank you so much. That was so beautiful. I needed to hear that. I think everyone needed to hear that. So it is a beautiful thing. That was your analog electric concentric dose of wisdom, according to the master of the zodiac, Athen Chimenti. We appreciate Athen being here as always, and looking forward to 2026. And in the end, it does not matter whether you look at the sky from 2,000 years ago, the sky today, the sky broken into perfectly even slices, or even the sky split up into 13 varied chunks. If you are looking up and out at all, you are also looking down and in. That is where the magic happens. You are the celestial heavens in a form knowable and actionable, and you are all the energies of the universe, balanced and bundled in the unique way only you could know and be. So find those stars and planets within you and let them guide you toward your truest immersion in self. And until you rise united with all, travel well, aim for balance, and always look inside first. Mwah.
Glued to these screens, it's a plot to drop the IQ. Fighting amongst each other over rulers that don't like you. Prefer us trapped in melancholy with the wood ones of holly. Suggestions that obliterate to camouflage the folly. attempted mental robbery, executed sloppily, the hypocrisy, this mockery, and walk the talk with me. Put the hands up to touch the Akasha, cause you know deep down there's something bigger than your wallet.